My fellow Americans,
How much worse can it get?
I know how disappointed you feel because
The vast majority of the media has said nothing of substance.
this is painful, and it will be for a long time. But I want you to remember this.
the change only happens when ordinary people get involved.
It will not be a peaceful change.
To quote the great Leonard Cohen,
It will be a usurpation.
And to all who are watching this,
Democrats or Republicans,
Whether you are young or whether you're young at heart, I won't stop.
those who ignore these elemental existential facts are traitors, and the usurper will live in infamy.
may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of whatever the hell this show is called. It is April the 13th, and I am your host, Brandon Sutton, and I am joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Richard. Before you say anything, Richard, make sure you're unmuted.
Oh, good call. You nailed it. You nailed it right.
I nailed it.
You
Got
nailed
it.
it. You nailed it.
Basic
So,
audio technician.
just happy everyone here's joining us. We've got a great show lined up. We have a special guest with us that we're going to get into very soon. I guess, Brandon, if you just want to tell folks a little bit about what the show's going to be, and then I will get our guest ready.
Yeah, we have a jam-packed show here tonight, and as we all know, I get a little bit too involved in each topic, so Richard's here to keep me in line and make sure we don't just go off the rails entirely. But starting out first, we have a wonderful guest joining us, Miss Dorothy Gase, running for Congress in Washington's 3rd Congressional District. Say hello, Miss Gsque.
Hello, it's Dorothy Gase.
Oh, Gsque. I'm sorry, I've been pronouncing that wrong this whole time. That's my bad. Although in my defense, we did have a green room, and I said it a few times, and she didn't respond, so I kind of just kept going with it. But that's my apologies. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. So, Richard, you're more familiar with Miss Gsque's district because you live in Washington. Why don't you come in here and ask her some of those burning questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get in here. I got a dare here who helped secure the guests.
No, it's too late. It's too late. So I'm no longer on the show. I may as well just hang up now then. Man, forget y'all. Let's go Pins. Playoff hockey.
All of the
All right.
all of my fake professionalism.
Well,
okay.
all right, Ms. Gsque. So just go ahead and tell us a little bit about your district and what the race that you're looking at running, and tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
All right, so I am running for the 3rd Congressional District in Washington State for the House of Representatives in 2018. The 3rd Congressional District is 7 counties. It's 10,000 square miles and compromises a lot of Southwest Washington. It is currently held by a Republican who doesn't seem to want to actually show up in the district and talk to us. And I am a 3rd-generation public servant. My grandfather served in the State Department. My father in the Army, and I joined the Army like my father. I deployed to Iraq as the only woman in an otherwise all-male combat unit. At the time, women were allowed to serve in combat roles, yet I would find myself leading combat patrols, managing base security, and on the worst days, losing my brothers. And I am running because I find politicians to be entirely too eager to enter into and continue war.
Excellent. I appreciate that. I had heard some of that as you described being a combat veteran from when you had introduced Bernie when he was in Washington. You want to tell us a little bit about that experience?
Well, it was an incredible honor. It was a really surreal experience for me. I'd actually never spoken in front of a crowd that large. It was actually my only 2nd time speaking in front of a crowd. So it was really overwhelming, and I had to write a speech within a few days, but it was incredible to be able to introduce Bernie.
Yeah, and without as not being a typical politician, you mentioned your background. What is it that drove you to really to take it to this point where you're actually running as a congressional representative at the national level?
I think my experience in Iraq really has driven me to this point. I mean, I've been waiting for 10 years for the progressive movement to really kind of get together and start working as one big force, and this is really the time.
Excellent. And I know with what we're seeing now nationally in national politics, we've seen that more escalations happening abroad. Where would you see yourself as in Congress? How would you see your voice affecting what's going on as far as getting further engaged in the Middle East? Where would you find yourself?
I would find myself probably standing on the side that Tulsi Gabbard is standing on at this point, that we really need to take a step back and reconsider what we're doing. We've been at war now for 15 years. You know, we're going on our 16th, and that's just insane. We've never been at war that long. There seems to be no talk about how we achieve peace. You know, what is our end game? It's just seems to be how many more countries can we drop bombs on, and that isn't going to make us any safer.
$300 million bombs most recently, which is that's a lot of college tuitions that we just dropped over Afghanistan, and I doubt that anybody there got any smarter. So there's we have a lot of work to do. I think domestically in Congress, one of the things that I've noticed some Congress folks in Washington haven't gotten on board with, Denny Heck comes to mind, who ran and lost in your district, is not currently supporting H.R. 676, which is Medicare for all. I presume, being a Bernie backer, that's something that would fall in your wheelhouse?
Oh, absolutely. There's no better way for us to ensure healthcare for everyone. It will save families thousands of dollars a year. It will save employers. And, you know, and it will ensure that everybody has health care.
Absolutely. And let's see here. One of the other topics that I think we had in mind was with what's going on, what happened in Kansas, and we're going to talk later in the show about that race. But I imagine you had heard that the candidate there, who's definitely more progressive than Kansas is generally going to be known for, didn't get much support from the Democratic Party, saying basically that by giving him any support, they would have forced him to lose. I guess a little bit about your thoughts about that, and then what you feel is going to be, whether you're going to get support and whether you're already getting support either locally from the local party, state party, and national Democratic Party.
Well, the DCCC has already said that they are considering targeting this race. Now, whether that means they're going to bring in their own candidate or whether they're just going to support the strongest, well, whoever wins the primary, we won't know yet.
Right.
But I think that
I was just going to say quickly that I know
absurd they didn't
that
help.
Tom mentioned that, and Keith suggested that they were going to try and stay out of it, particularly especially if the seat isn't already held by a Democrat in this situation. So it's just a plain primary, that they're going to stay out of it until one of you emerges from the primary. So I guess do you see an establishment candidate that you could see being your opposition if they were to take that kind of course?
So far, no. It doesn't seem like they're finding anyone who wants to jump in to the race. Establishment candidates haven't done well, so I don't think it would really benefit them.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the history of your congressional district, and I noticed that Bernie, during the Democratic primary, blew Hillary out, as he did in much of Washington, about 80% to 20%. But it's also, I found interesting that Obama won in 2008, and there was some redistricting done after that to make it a bit more Republican. He lost in 2012, and also Hillary lost in 2016. But there is a good chance that, since it wasn't Obama, that Democrats could win. So what kind of strategies are you looking at to win over the people within your district?
Well, we're taking on a populist campaign. You know, it's grassroots driven. We're really sticking kind of more to the economic issues. We have high unemployment outside of Clark County in the smaller counties. And so, I mean, that's a lot of the reasons why they're attracted to Trump, is that he promised jobs. And that is something that we're talking a lot more about.
Now, I know one of the things that Bernie got a lot of static for early in the race and has been a bit of a sticking point within the Democratic Party in general has been guns. As a veteran yourself and living in that area, which I know tends to probably have more guns than someplace like Seattle would, as far as like for hunting and other recreational shooting. Where do you find yourself when it comes to guns and gun control and such?
I find myself, I think we all can agree on universal background checks. Let's prevent criminals from getting guns. I think, we can look at gun violence from a public health perspective and really try to figure out what is causing the issues before we really start talking about changing the laws.
All right, me and I'm kind of on this. I'm in that camp myself. I'm a gun owner and such, so I'm for reasonable checks. In like, I know that's not going to solve the problem, but until we're at least making those steps, that we're not going to be making any bigger steps. Like where one of the things I think is going to be very important is something like HR 676, providing the access to the healthcare and hopefully, ideally, the mental health care that is going to help prevent not just the aggressive shootings against other people, but the predominantly and the majority of shootings, which are also usually suicide related, particularly among our veterans. And so I think those all kind of fit together in a particular way that we see having somebody in Congress who supports something like that and has the perspective as you do could be very valuable. So with that, I want to open up the conversation to my other hosts here. So let me just try and set things up here.
I appreciate that. In the meantime, I'm going to ask a quick question. So for full disclosure, Dorothy and I are friends. I consider a very good friend. We were both delegates together to the national convention up in Philly. But just, Dorothy, I want to talk real quick about some of your background. You have a background in mathematics. How do you feel, and I say this as one person who's majoring in math and physics and somebody else who's in the same kind of field, how do you think that perspective will help Congress, will help your district, especially being that, and for those of you, again, who are outside of Washington, this district lies on the border with Oregon, so part of it is essentially Portland and parts of it are considerably more rural. How do you feel you're able to bridge that gap and do so just speaking from an economic standpoint?
Well, I think, my background in math, especially having studied game theory, I think I have pretty good grasp on how people's behaviors are affected by the economy and how people react to things. I think when we go out and we're out in the more rural areas of the district, their issues really are jobs, affordable housing. So they're really the same issues that we're seeing inside of Vancouver and inside of Clark County.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a question actually from a viewer named David Martin, and they ask if you support coal and oil export in Vancouver in particular.
I do not. I believe that it is time for us to move away from fossil fuels. I think that to continue to invest in infrastructure for fossil fuels is the wrong direction to go.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think about some of the other things that actually, you know what? There was something that was recently posted in our Slack, and I'm going to read it out loud right now. It was posted by Feel the Burn, so Dave Conan, those of you guys who've been watching for all, you guys know he's one of our producers. The NBC News says they were given this information by sources that the U.S. may launch a strike in North Korea if they go to perform a nuclear test. What are your thoughts on that kind of situation? And if you're elected to Congress, how would you advise your colleagues to vote on things like this, on authorization of force, authorization of movement of troops, and things like things of that nature? What specifics could you give us?
Well, I think, if we're going to enter into war, it really needs to be an absolute necessity that our lives are at risk, that our nation is really facing a true risk, that it's not something that's based on falsified information. So without having all of the information, without having all of the intelligence that's been gathered, I really couldn't make a decision on that. But I think that we definitely need to really consider not just how we react, but how we get ourselves out of it. And that's something that is missing.
That's very much appreciated. I'm going to open up as well. Thank you again for joining us tonight, Dorothy. And again, full disclosure, Dorothy and I are friends, so obviously she has my endorsement, but I'd like to see what everyone else has to say.
Brandon, go ahead.
Well, I'd be curious to know what your interaction with the Democratic National Party, or rather, the Democratic Party at the national level has been like. So as we saw and what we were going to talk about later, the race in Kansas there was this big sort of gap between, the Bernie-crat who was running and the national party. And so you describe yourself as a Bernie supporter who's running for Congress. In what ways do you feel like that's incompatible, or maybe compatible with the Democratic Party as it exists now? Like, do you feel like as a Bernie-crat who's running, you're welcome in the Democratic Party at the national level?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, it's something Adair can talk about too, is just that my real experience with the National Party was at the National Convention, and they were completely out of touch with Bernie supporters and why we were so passionate about having a different candidate, someone who was not quote unquote establishment. They just really are overly protective of their corporate backers, and that's just not what we want. And so having made a commitment to grassroots fundraising and not campaigning the traditional route, I'm not sure they're going to like me at all.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh yeah, I was gonna follow up. So as far as as I've been told that your district went to Trump in the election, right, in the 2016 election. So you spoke a bit generally, but how have you sought to close that gap between, the Trump voter and yourself in trying to win this election, or is it just about mobilizing more Democrats in your district?
I think it's mostly about mobilizing more people to come out to vote. I mean, not just Democrats, but independents, primarily looking at younger voters and giving them the inspiration to vote. But we can talk to Trump voters, if we come to them from a place of understanding and we just really kind of communicate about the economic issues. I think we can kind of bridge that gap a little bit. A lot of them actually want single payer. They want universal background checks. They want money out of politics. They want the same things we do. They just kind of have a different cultural perspective.
And so you found a few Trump supporters who are willing to cross that aisle to work with, have you been able to turn any of them from Trump, not necessarily Trump, but from the Republican to your candidacy? Have you? Well, at least a few of them.
I've actually talked more with people who don't like Trump, who tend to be libertarian. But I have talked to some Trump voters, but not in my district yet.
And actually, I want to ask a question really quick, because you and your campaign, you've got a lot more activity in the local Democratic Party than I have since everything went down. Since Brennan asked about the national party, which we know as a rule tend not to really get involved in too many races unless they think it's imminently winnable or they're going to lose the seat they already have. What's your interaction been with, like, at the state level? Do you think that any of the proclaimed changes that have been made, such as self-identified Bernie-crats, quote unquote, taking over the Washington State Democratic Party, has your interaction with them been better or worse than what we had leading up to and in Philadelphia?
I think it has been a lot better. I mean, we have a lot more progressives sitting on the state committee now, but it's really too soon to tell. I mean, they just had their reorganization in January, so we'll still have to wait it out and see what it looks like further down the road.
Absolutely.
All right. Sorry, there we go.
Looks like we have some background noise there, Richard.
Some horns honking that could be coming from anywhere. Brandon is in New York, so I'm gonna blame Brandon.
Brandon, do you have any more questions, or just want to make sure I open up the floor too?
Oh no, I mean I'm pleased to see more people becoming involved in local politics, especially well, not local, but necessarily, but becoming involved for politics in the aftermath of the 2016 race, because there was that I would say predictable outcome that some people would become disenchanted with the system altogether in the wake of Bernie's loss and Trump's ascendancy to president. But it's good to see people are actually getting involved.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that you were inspired and that you took that inspiration and are really putting in the work and trying to make it happen. And so before we say goodbye, I just want to give you an opportunity to go ahead and mention your website or social media or any ways that people can get out if they like what they heard and want to figure out how they can contribute to your campaign, either volunteer or financially, and just give them that information. I will get you up on screen.
All right, so the website is dorothy4congress.com, and you can contribute there. You can sign up to volunteer, and you can endorse the campaign. Our Facebook is at Dorothy4 Congress, and Twitter is at Dorothy4 House.
Excellent. And anything else you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
I just want to close it out with, if people are really serious about getting candidates into office who aren't beholden to big money donors, they're really going to have to start donating.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and I hope some people who have the opportunity are able to do that or share with somebody who might be interested, and we look forward to seeing you later in the race and getting an update and see how things are coming along. So until then, just want to thank you again for joining us and have a wonderful evening.
Right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen. That was Dorothy. I want to make sure we get the last name right.
Gsque. I messed up the first time, but now it's fine. I got it.
Gsque. And running in Washington's 3rd Congressional District. And it's currently a Republican seat. And so if she does end up winning, that will be help changing the balance of the House. So it's an important race for those of you who like to stay up to date on the national races around the country. But with that, we go ahead and go to Brandon. We can transition.
Yeah. Lead us into the next topic, Rich. Let's get to the debacle that was Kansas 4th District.
Yeah, we alluded to it earlier when we were speaking with Dorothy there about what the National Democratic Party had to say. Something to the effect of, well,
mute her mic.
I will try and do that as soon as possible. But go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, there was a special election in Kansas a few nights ago where a Bernie-crat named Thompson was running in deep red Kansas, the middle of the country, America's bread basket, and the district had swung towards Trump in the general election. I want to say by 20 plus points. Mm-hmm. And he was able to close that distance to about 6 points last night, all without the help of the National Democratic Party, because they felt that they'd be better off tweeting out "I miss Obama" bumper stickers. Is that everything? Did I cover entirely, Rich? Or did I forget any key parts?
That sounded like the majority of it. I mean, their reaction has been their explanation for it being so close, and then that they couldn't possibly have been bothered because it would have made them perform even worse is astounding to me. Like that's as if they couldn't have snuckily contributed towards helping him get his name out there or knock some doors or anything like that. That obviously would have just blown everything up.
I mean, the excuse that they gave, and this is the excuse that's been going around pretty much all your partisan hacks, all your Democratic Party stands, all your DCCC apologists, is this idea that Democratic parties, like their brand is so toxic. Like the Democratic Party brand is so toxic and so only viable in places like that Georgia race that's going on right now in the suburbs of Georgia and in coastal elite cities, that for them to get involved in this race in Kansas, for them to put money, for them to send money there, they would have only hurt his chances. Funny enough, though, after this pro-choice, pro-LGBTQ candidate in the deep red country spends all his time closing this distance between him and his opponent, Estes, who went on to win, they come in and talk about how, the Democratic Party, like, he almost won. Look how well he did.
Yeah, that is our guest Doug contributing. I don't think he's very impressed.
That was not my fault. That was my housemate's dog. He likes to. Oh, but you know what? Housemate doesn't really tend to remember this.
Is going back to the Democrats is like, and I think I remember hearing like initially one of their initial, or at least a lot of people were defending it on Twitter, is they couldn't put money in every race. Also,
but
so
here, can I want to jump into this because I have such an issue with the Democratic Party saying, we can't, and with people saying, well, they can't put money there. They can put money into every race. That's kind of what their job is to do. But the fact of the matter is they don't want to help people like this out, right? They don't want to help out people. They don't want to help out actual progressives. They don't want to help out people that are going to come in and try to change that status quo and get the Democratic Party back to its roots of actually trying to help people, or, worst case scenario being FDR-like. It's not something that lines up well with their agenda. The fact of the matter is, most of the Democratic constituents, most of those Democrats in general, they don't want people like that. They don't want people like those of us on the show. They don't want people like you guys at home watching and listening to this. They want that, cut and dry, cookie cutter corporate congressman. That's what they want. That's the reason why they didn't pay any attention and go in and actually do the damn thing, because knocking doors does nothing but help.
Well, here's the thing. So let's engage in that stupidity, right? Let's walk with them down that pier. It's a stupid pier constructed by a drunk longshoreman, but let's walk with them down that pier, that train of thought, where the Democratic Party, the DCCC, they can't even give this guy $30K with what he was asking for. They can't even give him $30K in order to print out flyers, buy some ad space, all this stuff, because that money comes with the taint of the Democratic Party's vague brand, whatever they consider themselves to be ideologically. And so the question becomes, if that's the case, then the Democratic Party is not nationally viable, right? Because that's the point they're trying to make. And it's the point that's been made by other people, and a few members of the DCCC, that their bread and butter is rich suburbs. Their bread and butter are coastal cities sometimes, and that's where they, that forms the core of Democratic national. That forms the Democratic Party's core, rank and file voter class, and so that means that they are actually not viable from from the nationwide perspective, right? That they are a fringe party, although both parties are a fringe party. Both parties don't really support the vast majority of Americans, even if you consider even if you will believe that they support their voters, not just the 1%. Okay, fine. The Democratic Party, this is exactly the opposite of what Tom Perez ran on. This is the exact opposite of what Tom Perez ran on, insofar that they were supposed to be doing a 50-state strategy to help win back these seats. And as Thompson showed, this was an incredibly winnable district. This was an incredibly easily winnable district. But they feel that their money is better off locked into, short bets. And you know what? I can understand that. I can understand having to prioritize election. But if that's the case, even for optics, they should have thrown money into this. Even if they didn't think it would help, and if they didn't think they could help him win, for optics to put their money where their mouth is in terms of this, we need to have a 50-state strategy, they should have put money into this race. And if they don't feel like they could have won, they need to have a fund to run candidates in every district. They just simply need a fund so they can actually afford to run candidates in every district. I don't believe that mentality. I think they could have. I think this was an easily winnable district. If the Democratic money, there was that tweet going around by some hack who said that said, anyone who tells you that the Democratic Party throwing money at Thompson would have helped win KS-04 is not very smart, and you should stop following them. Yeah, throwing money at this district, throwing $20,000 at this district would have helped them win, obviously, because that of course it would have.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I'm sure there was some money that came out of that district and went to the National Party. So it wasn't even really the National Party money. That it was really money that came out of there anyway. It was local money, so they could at least given them that back.
The Democratic Party is a Ponzi scheme. The DCCC is a Ponzi scheme. Yeah, it's a Ponzi scheme, and it only serves to keep specific people in their seats.
Before you continue on that tangent, I'm going to jump in because this whole idea of let's just go down this rabbit hole and act like they could. They have the money on hand. B, it was an eminently winnable district, and the idea that anybody ever, including you, even if you're playing devil's advocate, would say that, well, even if they thought this wasn't a sure bet, it's a sure bet if you use the right kind of campaign rhetoric, and that's exactly the point that we've been trying to make forever. The fact of the matter is, Trump won that district on a pseudo-populist message, and this Bernie crap shrunk that point differential exponentially by running as a populist, because that's what Bernie is. You take those ideas, you take that populist message, you take this into the reddest district in the entire nation, and I guarantee you it's a viable message and will win. Why? Because people care less about whether you've got a D or an R at the end of your name to what you're running on. And the fact of the matter is the Democratic Party does not want a populist candidate. They do not want people running for office that care more about you, I, and the viewers at home than Walmart and JCPenney and all these other big major corporations. That's who they care about. Let's stop pussyfooting around. Let's stop playing devil's advocate. There's enough people in the media that do that for the Democratic Party as well. And let's just call a duck a duck.
No, I know.
I think Democrats may not even just want to win. I mean, they might get the best of both worlds with what they've got now, and they might be realizing how sweet Republicans had it for the last 8 years by just screaming up from the rafters and not actually having any responsibility. What more could they possibly want than to be able to feed their military-industrial complex contributors, their prison-industrial complex contributors, all those people, but be able to blame it all on Donald Trump, not even on the Republicans, just on Donald Trump, so that they can feed all the people that are feeding them without taking any of the blame. To me, it's almost if they want to lose.
Well, the Democratic Party, the DCCC does not exist to run and win candidates in that kind of abstract way. They exist to keep leadership entrenched in certain people's hands. That's why Nancy Pelosi is still, the Democrats' leader in the House. That's why Steny Hoyer is still the Democratic, the second in charge. That's why, the Democratic Party is run by these 70-plus-year-old Reagan era elected officials who just don't understand what's going on in America right now. They can't understand how this guy, Thompson, went into deep red state and actually almost won. And for all intents and purposes, he could have closed that gap. He could have won. It was a microscopic difference between him and Estes that could have been overcome with some national help, if that was what the Democratic Party at that level was meant to do. But the DCCC is not meant to give that kind of help to candidates. And what it's meant to do is basically, act as a bank account for the Democratic Party House leadership from money that comes from coastal cities and some other key places. And they'll keep winning coastal cities and other key places. And once you see this kind of thing happen in Kansas, in this district, it becomes very clear how they lost those 1,000+ seats. It's very clear how they lost them at this point.
Especially the same thing with how Bernie went into West Virginia and got a standing ovation and got a whole crowd of people, many Trump voters included, to recognize healthcare as a right and not a privilege.
Okay, I have an idea. Okay, but that's why this is so important, right? That's why this right here with this dude in Kansas, Thompson, is so important. I will say this: the DCCC, the DNC, is still incredibly very petty, and they are still trying to squash this Bernie crack insurrection that's going on. So, as long as you're okay with them only running in districts that represent whatever kind of ideological position they have, so suburbs and coastal cities, then you should donate to the DCCC. But the DCCC disappeared tomorrow. It wouldn't really hurt everybody. So I'll get back to that, right? Because all this money in politics is a little bit. It can really obscure more complex issues that are going on. But what this guy did, and what Bernie Sanders has been doing for the past few months following the election, is show how disingenuous the Democratic Party has been for the past 30 years about why they have to be neoliberals. And by that I mean and by they again I mean Nancy Pelosi and people like Chuck Schumer. They've been putting forth this idea that of course they personally support progressive economic policy. Of course they personally support having everyone insured. If it were up to Nancy Pelosi, as she said at an event, she would make single payer health care tomorrow. She would plaster America with community health centers, but that's just not the way it works. And so I'm sorry, got a little excited. I'm going to say is so they've been operating under this dynamic, and it's under this paradigm that says, well, in order for us to win at all and be able to get any kind of social progressivism, we have to run to the middle. We have to run to the middle in pursuit of capturing the center, so that we can have have equal rights, LGBTQ rights, gay marriage. We can have all these things, but Bernie's done. He's proven that they should be running towards the economic left. That should be where they sit. They should not be, picking these, trying to engage on the battlefield of neoliberal identity politics, of the culture wars. They should be attacking Republicans where they live, which is the economic leftist policies. And that's why Bernie Sanders was popular. That's why Donald Trump was popular, even if he wasn't being, particularly genuine about his desire to push get people jobs. But that's why he won, because he spoke to that. He at least acknowledged people didn't have jobs. The Democratic Party wants to pretend like everyone's working right now, or rather everyone should be glad to work at McDonald's until they die.
So here's one of the things that I really want to point out, because what you say is exactly correct. The Democrats need to run to the economic left. Here's the thing about the middle, though, in this country. Our middle in America is inherently situated on the economic
The middle doesn't exist.
No, yes, it does. The middle, shut up, because yes, it does. The middle exists, not in this country. In this country, the middle economically is the economic right, period. In other countries, you see things like the European Green Party, which is actually both on the economic left and what we would call traditionally libertarian, meaning they don't want the government to affect your life, they want the government to control business. That's what they're talking about. That actually exists in places like the UK. However, in the United States, our liberals are to the right economically. That is their home base. That is why Nancy Pelosi says things like it doesn't matter, we're all capitalists. That's why she spins this idea, her and other Democrats spin this idea of, I would love to do all these economically left things, all these socially progressive things, but don't actually do it, because there is no such thing as the left in the United States of America as far as it pertains to political groups. That's why in some places, like when you have these people that are running as Democrats that are actually to the left economically, you're not going to see them get help. You're not going to see them when you're going to see Bernie Sanders sabotage. You're going to see the people that have been inspired to run because of him be sabotaged. And for those of you that have commented, why doesn't Bernie just work with the Greens? It's just not a viable option right now. Don't worry about Bernie. If you're really that concerned about moving things to the economic left, like Brandon appears to be, I would suggest we start running encouraging our friends to run or volunteering.
Bernie has sold out. Bernie is more of a pragmatist than anything, and he sees the danger in the Trump administration, and so he's kind of, at first people were defending his working with the Democratic Party, working within that party post-election, because it was the best way they felt that they could affect change. But the Democratic Party, even with Bernie there, seems to have been, demanded that he come to them on everything. And it started with him parroting the Russia thing, and it started with him. And now we're at the point where he was refusing to defend Tulsi Gabbard on her stance against bombing, unilaterally deciding to bomb Syria. He's not coming out in favor of things he should be coming out in favor of. He's not defending. He also didn't campaign for this guy in Kansas, although they were at a meeting together earlier this year that had nothing to do with this particular event in Topeka, I'm going to say. But like Bernie Sanders has moved further to the establishment post-election, and the establishment has moved to the left, and it's because we see, time and time again, that to the Democratic Party establishment, the biggest threat to them is not economic, fascism. It's not economic. It's not a merger of the corporate state and the public sector. What it is, it's the economic left. So they're going to continue to punch left. They're going to continue to try to use the DCCC to prevent these independent, these progressive candidates from actually getting anywhere. So, I mean, do I think that the DCCC coming to Kansas would have been, lights out, Thompson is going to win? That depends. It depends insofar as to whether or not they were actually going to help him win, give him what he needed to push forth this message, or were they going to demand that he move towards the center, because that's what their consultants said would actually help them win. Because let's make no bones about it, the DNC and the DCC, as Ellison, as he was running in November for the head, is a consultantocracy. It is an incestuous consultantocracy where the same handful or 20 or 3 dozen failures continue to be shuffled through, shuffled into different positions. Robbie Mook is still doing stupid. Neera Tanen's still there. The people who are responsible, at least in the short term, for all of the losses that occurred in the Hillary Clinton campaign are still there. Yeah, Tom Perez went out of his way to fire the rank and file, but those people weren't even making the decisions. It's like that whole theater. Why is Neera Tanden still doing? I guess she's not necessarily DNC, but why is Neera Tanden still being elevated to the position where she knows what she's talking about? But it's just a consultantocracy.
That's factual, and here's part of the reason why. Here's 2 things that I see why that tends to happen. You get this just kind of musical chairs with people in different positions of power. It's incredibly easy to actually get inside of the DNC. A lot of time, I've got friends that, as Bernie-crats, got elected to the Central Committee, now are getting elected to DNC spots. So that's part of it. But a large portion of this is, it's like every millennial applying for a job ever after we graduate college. And when we go to apply for a job, they say entry level must have 10 years of experience.
Oh, God.
Period. That's kind of... Whew. Like, that's exactly what it is in the Democratic Party. That's what they're saying. There's a reason why there's nobody able to come in, because their requirement for the job is you've already done the job for at least a decade.
Well,
there's a great tweet on that out there. That's glorious. But I just wanted to quickly come back to the Bernie thing real quick, because I know that there's a lot of people out there that are still standing with Bernie or tolerating Bernie or whatever he's doing. And for me, where I'm at personally is basically this better be part of the most epic breakup that's going to catapult him into absolute dominance of the left, or I'm more or less done with him. But then that leaves us with, well, who do we have left to be the champion, the flag bearer of this left movement? Who would we see lead us into 2020 without talking too much about that?
Well, here's 2 things, right? So I want to go with what you said first.
That big ass bomb at some point.
Yeah, we do. We can go on after the show. We can just put that out as part of our new podcast, The Discourse, which you can catch, which I'm sure there is a link somewhere to our podcast.
There will be.
Where somewhere. I was just looking, there's not.
The point I was going to say was this. It's like, so we can't fall into that trap with Bernie that we've accused people of falling into that trap with Democrats with. And by that, I mean, we can't do this thing where it's like, well, if we want to have any leader, we'll have to be comfortable with them compromising to the point in which they're almost indistinguishable from the things they're supposed to be leading us against. And that's what people say about people like Joe Manchin. Like, well, wouldn't you prefer it be a Democrat in that seat than a Republican? Well, if they're doing the exact same thing, no, it doesn't make a difference to me. I think because at that point, you're talking about just pure tribalism. You're talking about reducing all of politics down to us versus them, when there may in fact be no actual, qualitative difference between us and them. And to speak to Adair's point, when it comes down to the consultantocracy and to the way who gets elevated positions of leadership in the Democratic Party, a lot of it has to do with who can raise the most money. It's just like what is considered viable in the what is considered viable in the Democratic Party is, well, who can raise the most amount of money from corporations? Corporate money is very, very powerful to them. Who can raise the most amount of money from corporations? Who can bring in the most money at fundraisers? Who can do that? And yeah, they like Bernie. They looked at how much money Bernie made from small grassroots donations, but they have no intentions of giving up that, that corporate money. They have no intention of getting off that corporate teat. So if you're not willing to, spout lip service to the necessity of that corporate money, the Democratic Party, they still don't want you there. And so this is them being incredibly petty, but also them not really understanding the value of the Bernie crap. They still don't understand the value of Bernie Sanders, or rather, they don't understand what has made him the most popular president, politician in America, because in their own heads, they're only on two modes. They don't see any problem with corporate money, and they only see, shallow neoliberal identity politics. So in their head, they're like, well, this guy can't get any he doesn't get any corporate money. Plus, he's just some old white Jewish man who may in fact be an atheist. I don't understand why he's so popular. And it's because they refuse to look at his economic policy. They refuse to say, maybe Bernie Sanders, the only distinguishing feature from Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders and any Democratic politician or any politician at all is his politics. I mean, like his actual policy positions. It's not about his identity in a very shallow way. It's about his politics. His policies are important, and people believe him because he appears to be earnest, because his rhetoric for the large part matches his past.
Well, here's something that I want to actually talk about, especially as it pertains to how people move through the Democratic Party, what the up and comers are doing right now, and it's actually kind of interesting. You've got two kinds of people that I know that are running for Congress or planning to as Democrats. You've got the Dorothys, who we had on earlier in the show. So if you're just joining us, please check that out after this ends. And you've got people like a couple of friends of mine whose names I will not mention. But what they've done is one of them has worked for Denny Heck. The other has worked for the Washington state governor, and they get into these little niche jobs, and they make all these not backroom deals. You meet all these people, right? You meet the people, you meet, so-and-so, now I meet so-and-so. Then you get to go into the parties. And once you're in the parties, then you get to meet the fundraisers. So people that want to be in Congress, these fools are already sitting in there and just shaking this person's hand, shaking this person's hand, just going through. And I mean, for some people, they're like, oh yeah, it's putting in the dues. In the Democratic Party, it's not so much what you're about as it is who you know and how much money you have on hand. And that's one of the biggest things I'm hearing about with a lot of my sources here in Washington state races, who I've been talking to. There's a lot of upstart challengers, and it's pissing a lot of people off from the establishment simply because they don't have the fundraising ability that some of these other candidates do. And I think it's kind of, frankly, it's absolutely ridiculous. The Democrats care really about two things: who you know inside of the party, who can give you that leg up and give you that boost, that nepotism bit of things, and how much money does your campaign or your potential campaign have on hand. And if it's not more than the other guy, then they don't really care about you.
Well, I will say this, right? And this is, we'll move on after I make this last statement. The Democratic Party is not prepared for the kind of scrutiny that they are now living under in the Trump era, the era of Trump. They are just not prepared for that kind of scrutiny from their rank and file voter. They're not prepared for that kind of constant attention on their actions or inactions. Because I don't know about you guys, but I really didn't, and I don't know how people did notice, but I personally, living under Obama, and I have to say this, and I'm sure some people are going to say, well, I noticed, but fuck them, because who cares? I didn't even notice how many seats they lost until Obama was gone. I never in the past 8 years thought to myself, or rather thought to even check how many seats the Democratic Party was holding across America at the state and federal level. I knew they were kind of doing crappily in the Senate, but that was always chalked up. Senate in the House. That was always, they always chalked it up to gerrymandering. They always chalked it up to a lot, gerrymandering and the loss of seats during the Iraq War because of the whole wartime jingoist mentality that they also were fermenting themselves, but whatever. But it wasn't until Obama left the office, and it definitely wasn't until that I started seeing just article after article come out about how they had lost 1,000 seats. They lost 1,000 seats. They are now a fringe party. And I remember just remembering the past. I recalled the past, 6 or 7 years, and constantly hearing from the liberal media, from the mainstream media, from both sides, really, because this is the way both sides presented, that the Democratic Party was the ones who were making all the decisions. They were in charge, and the Republican Party was this big fringe party, only for that veil to be removed with the Obama administration leaving. And it turns out the Democratic Party is a fringe party. It's underrepresented around America, and a lot of it doesn't have to do with gerrymandering. It has to do with them just being, bad politicians and have and terrible candidates. And I think this is why I say that they're not really prepared for the constant scrutiny of the Trump administration, because they, especially when it also includes these Bernie-crats who are just killing it all over the place, because it reveals them for the fact that it hasn't been this really ethereal notion of the Democratic brand just being persona non grata in certain red states. It's not about them not being willing to vote for Democrats. It's not about people not liking social politics. It's really just what makes the Democratic Party unpopular is the neoliberalism. People do not like that neoliberalism. The Republican Party is able to speak to the concerns of middle America by, appealing to nostalgia, appealing to, the loss of American jobs, appealing to all these grievances. The Democratic Party doesn't have anything except for, hey, we have this sort of shallow understanding of what it takes to be socially progressive, but we're also going to ship your jobs overseas. We're also going to take a lot of corporate money. So I don't think they've been trying to present us the Democratic brand for no good reason, or rather is people don't like it, or rather that the reason is because of their support of social progressivism. But it's really their economic fiscalism is what people don't like with them.
Yeah,
but now that we're seeing
that they want to polish up and make shiny, rather than take a gem like we might have saw in Dorothy there, who may not be a political politically shiny in the traditional sense, real smooth and slick, but is bringing the policy and the perspective that the people will actually vote for. And I think that is what the Democratic Party is lacking. Is they'd rather have somebody with slick hair. They'd rather have a John Edwards than a Bernie Sanders.
I'll put it to you like this: Washington State has, Brandon, I agree with you. Actually, I didn't realize that so many seats were lost across at the state level. I did know about the Senate
governorships. There was quite a few stories about governorships being lost, but they didn't break it down at the House level and at the state level governments just how bad Democrats were losing. But go ahead and finish it there. We have a couple minutes left, just FYI.
But just real quick, what I want to say about just how the kind of people they want to run, right, is you'll see Washington State, the liberal bastion that is, the one part of the state that has the largest number of black people is Pierce County and South King County, which Pierce County is included in the district that I'm in right now, Congressional District 10, along with my co-host here, Richard. We have a congressman named Denny Heck who refuses to go to black neighborhoods in the largely black county that he represents, in the largely black cities, two of the biggest cities in Washington State, including my hometown of Tacoma, the third largest city in the entire state. He doesn't show up. The Democrats would rather have a congressman who occasionally will talk to rural voters so they can say, well, we have a rural Democrat, they exist, who has the ability to raise more money from major donors than everybody else, than actually having someone who represents the community, represents Washington, who actually happens to be a progressive. Then he had, just generally, the dude sucks.
Yeah, actually, I want to mention briefly, I am going to be trying to make it to, he's doing one of these congressional town hall type talks locally, and I'm going to try and make it out there Tuesday. And if I do, you'll be able to find it. I'll try and either stream it live or record it and put it out on projectsanity.org, so you can check it out there if I'm able to make it out there.
Ask him about Russia. You should ask him about Russia.
That's actually, ironically, that's what his whole thing is about. It's about Russia, but it's not about what's going on with the Syria conflict. It's about it's going back to the election and talking about Russia's influence on the election. That's what he thinks the people in my area want to talk to him about. I'm going to talk about HR 676 for sure, but I'll take some feedback. What did you say, Adair?
Ask him why he hates black people.
Yep. I feel like I need to just bring a bus full of people.
Why do you not like black folks?
I feel like I should stop by and just grab some black people. Like, would you like to speak to the congressman that represents you and just ask him some questions about what he's doing?
I guess.
I feel like
I guess my only point was
he's more interested in paying the government.
No. I guess my only point was that Obama put a lot of people to sleep and
Oh yeah.
he was the master neoliberal. He had so perfectly mastered that language of neoliberalism that everyone kind of forgot that his policies were bad and that the Democratic Party was a failure. It was a burnt out husk of a party. And now
Selma's
that we
speech made
have
me think that racism was over. I mean,
yeah,
it was so good.
he was good at that. But now we have all of these Bernie crats running. We have all these progressive politicians running in places. And I hope we have more and more progressive Bernie crats, whether they run as independent or green or Democrat, no matter, just generally progressive running, to consistently prove dispel the myth the Democratic Party has been peddling for the past 30 years that these policies are not popular. And by these, I mean economic leftist policies like single payer, like expanding Social Security, like expanding, I'm forgetting, but generally generally that dispelling the myth that the reason for their failures is this idea that they are in favor of gay marriage, when the majority is that, I mean, the truth is that they've kind of just dropped the ball as it comes to basic jobs.
Yeah, that's what it is. And we're just about done. So I just remind everybody, if you go to projectsanity.org and you check out this video, you will be able to find the link to the podcast, which is where we're going to be continuing this conversation. It'll be posted at a later point in time, so make sure to go ahead and tune in to Ben tonight and check for the podcast after the show. Other than that, I'll pass it around.
Yeah, we're going to take a break, and so ideally you'll be able to hear the rest of this conversation if you are so inclined later, at some later date.
Derek?
I just want to thank everyone who's been here tonight to watch the show live. Thank you guys who are going to be listening. Get at me on Twitter, folks. Let me know about progressives running in your areas. That way we can try and get them on this show here.
There's Twitter handle for those of you who might have missed it.
Add a PS to the end of that because it still hasn't been updated.
Add a PS. Sorry, I never fixed that. So I'm pretty sure you search for it. You'll see them. You'll see them.
So. Right. Add a PS to the end of that, and you'll get the right one. If it says my tweets are blocked, you're on the wrong Twitter account.
All right. With that, I just want to thank everybody and good night and good luck.